Welcome into the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. You can also check us out every day, Monday through Friday on Dash Radio. Search for the Dash Radio app, download it for free, and then search for Nothing But Net, and you'll find us Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Pacific. Also, check out 5reasonsports.com. Plenty of news stories up there about the NBA Finals, but also about the Marlins in the playoffs against the Cubs. The Hurricanes play Clemson in about a week and a half, now ranked 8th in the country. And the Dolphins have a big game coming up against Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. So get all of that content for free. We do not charge a paywall on 5reasonsports.com. Also, our YouTube channel now getting close to 7,000 subscribers. Why? Because we've got original shows, we've got streaming shows as well, and we also have all of the Zoom videos, the important videos. So today you can find LeBron James, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Eric Spoelstra, and more up on our YouTube channel, and they go up quickly. Also, check out all the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We stay local with Miami sports fans just like you. Support them to support us. One of them is our friend Mark Brown over at markbrownpa.com. You can call the office at 954-566-5678. This is a real estate litigation and transaction law firm, both commercial and residential, with a full-service attorney-owned title company. So this is a one-stop shop. And Mark's got a $295 closing fee on all refinances and purchases when mentioning 5 Reasons. That's right. It's a great deal. $295 on the closing fee on all refinances and purchases when mentioning 5 Reasons. They also handle evictions for landlords and for tenants, and they offer flat fee evictions. Practicing for nearly 15 years here in South Florida. Again, the website is Mark, that's with a C, M-A-R-C, brownpa.com, or call the office at 954-566-5678. Another sponsor of this episode and of other episodes on the 5 Reasons Sports Network is our friend Dr. Jonathan Chung over at Keystone Chiropractic. Unless you're a manual laborer or a high-level athlete, you're more likely to have back pain because you're not lifting enough weights instead of lifting too much weight. Many back injuries occur because of deconditioning or chronic sitting. So one of the most effective ways to help heal and prevent back pain is by increasing core and back strength by lifting weights. If you want guidance on a weightlifting or core strengthening program, over at Keystone Chiropractic, they can put together a plan for you through a free consultation and telehealth visit. That's right, based in Wellington, but can see you over Zoom, telehealth, and make sure they can start getting taking care of your problem. Get more health tips like this and more by following at Keystone Neuro, that's KEYSTONE-NEURO, or at Dr. Jonathan Chung on Twitter and Instagram. And the website is chiropractickeystone.com. And now, today's episode.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5
on the floor.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily show on the Miami Heat and the NBA featuring Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, Alex Toledo, and Greg Sylvander. Part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network, also on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Pacific. Now, for those of you who followed the Big Three era, and pretty much everyone here did, you are familiar with the Heat Index, and the Heat Index was the bane of my existence, and here's why. Because here I was, little old me, covering the Miami Heat for the Palm Beach Post by myself, back when they actually used to cover the NBA. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, you know, here's me. I'm the Orlando Magic, right, in the state of Florida, and then the Miami Heat are bringing in, like, LeBron James and Chris Bosh and all these superstars. So they already had Mike Wallace here, and he was kind of like the guy who could handle, like, all the personality stuff and, you know, write about the players and really get inside, and had a really good relationship with them. And so, but that wasn't enough, apparently. So then it was, okay, we're going to bring Brian Windhorst down because he's got the relationship with LeBron and his people. So he's coming down. He's going to handle all the LeBron stuff and the personnel stuff and everything related to that. Then that's not enough. So we're going to get, like, the strategy guru, Kevin Arnovitz, to come down and handle all of that stuff. And then icing on the cake, okay, we're going to get somebody who understands everything that goes on with the numbers and sort of at a time when that was sort of just starting to explode in the NBA and the analytics. And that's Tom Haberstroh. So basically, they quadruple teamed me on a daily basis. And so sometimes that didn't go so well for me. But we've got one of the four here. We've actually had the other three here on Five on the Floor as well at one point or another. We got Tom Haberstroh. He's now the national NBA insider, not just writer, insider for NBAsports.com. Tom, thanks for beating my ass all those years, and thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
You just said NBAsports.com, but it's NBC.
Yes. NBC
I might do all of the NBA for NBC. It is very confusing. I think people have tripped up on my intro like 99% of the time. So you're with the herd on that one. So don't worry about that.
No, I'm not with the herd. I don't respect Colin Cowherd. But yes, I am with I am with the rest of the pack. What's a BAM? Isn't that what he said a few months ago? Anyway, let's get to the LeBron part of this before we get to anything else, because obviously you've written volumes and volumes on him, particularly those 4 years here in Miami. How has he changed as a player, and how does it show up in the numbers?
So the biggest thing is his assists. At this stage of his career, I don't think many people expected to see him leading the NBA in assists by a mile. And a lot of that is empowering Anthony Davis. Part of the reason why he brought Anthony Davis, in his words, brought him over to LA was he recognized that this guy was going to be the best teammate he's ever had. And if you look at the numbers, PER, win shares, Anthony Davis right now is the best player that LeBron has ever played with. And I know that's not going to go over very well in Miami, but the numbers are the numbers, okay? And in terms of significance to an organization, you can't argue that Anthony Davis is bigger to LA than what Dwayne Wade was for Miami. But LeBron recognized this guy is a Swiss Army knife. This guy is almost like 7 feet tall, and he can play like a guard. He can shoot. He can finish an alley-oop better than anybody. And he's a massive, massive problem for opposing teams. And so what LeBron did was essentially make him the focal point of the offense. And he's averaging about close to 9 assists this postseason, 10 assists in the regular season. And it was LeBron's way of saying, Anthony, you belong here. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that notion after watching Anthony Davis in this postseason. Like, that is a huge move for LeBron, not only to take a 26-year-old in his prime and make him a focal point of the team, but also it relieves a lot of pressure off of LeBron. Having Anthony Davis on his team and feeding him ad nauseum is a huge, huge relief physically from having to lead the team by himself. And so what you're seeing is LeBron is not the number one guy on his own team in PER. That's Anthony Davis. And so LeBron is cognizant of the fact that I can't do this by myself. And Anthony Davis, you're going to be the best big man in the NBA, bar none, and people are going to recognize it, and I'm going to make them recognize it.
Isn't part of him being the best teammate that he's ever had the fit? Because one of the things I know you wrote a lot about down here in Miami was the fit between Dwayne and LeBron. And look, part of it is also, peak Dwayne really only existed for 1 year with LeBron, maybe
exactly
a little over a year, right? I mean, the last 2 years were a struggle just to get on the court, and that was something that actually frustrated LeBron. And of course, part of the early in the first year, part of the problem was the two of them were trying to operate in the same spots on the floor, and it didn't work that well. And then, I always remember, Eric Spoelstra talking to me about, if I'd gone by the analytics, and I know you wrote a lot about this during, I think it was the 13 playoffs and to a degree the 14 playoffs, I wouldn't have played LeBron and Dwayne together because the numbers were so bad during some of those stretches with the two of them. So it has always seemed to me that LeBron getting with an elite big would be the thing that would be the most natural fit, as opposed to kind of what he had in the other two places, which I'm not saying that Bosh and Love were not elite bigs or somewhere in that territory, but they were in Anthony Davis, as opposed to kind of deciding who's going to take turns between him and Dwayne and then him and Kyrie.
Yeah, and LeBron and Dwayne, I think also you have to remember the spacing was so different with those two, with LeBron and Dwayne in a different era. I mean, they were starting Big Z and Eric Dampier, and Joel Anthony, like these guys couldn't space
and Dexter
the floor.
Pittman, Tom, don't forget those. What was it? 7 minutes in Indiana. Those fateful. Was it even that long? I think it was like 3.5 minutes. And Dexter went back to the bench, and we realized he's never playing again.
The chess game that Spo did in that series, where I think he and Pat discussed throughout the night. They had their backs against the wall. CB was out, and I think there was a debate about whether to go big or small. And Pat really wanted to go big because that's Pat, right? And Spo wanted to go, Spo wanted to go small. So almost like Spo was like, all right, Pat, you want to go big? Dexter Pittman, come on up.
You'll never go big again.
What was it? Was it 3 fouls in the first 2 minutes? It was a disaster. It was.
Well, we were sitting baseline, and I always remember Dexter coming off the floor, and it was like, he knew, he was a really nice guy. He was a really nice guy, but he just knew, you knew that was never, ever, ever happening again. And you're right. They went through this collection of bigs. Eddie Curry never really even got to see the floor.
Greg Oden. Yep.
Greg Oden experiment. Turioff obviously played some. They tried all of these different guys until, they finally sort of embraced what now seems in retrospect like the inevitable. But at the time, it was. This makes me feel really old. But at the time, it was not inevitable that you would just, okay, let's play Shane at the 4. Okay, and we're gonna play Bosch at the 5, and that's what we're gonna do.
Right, and the Thunder were like, we need to keep Kendrick Perkins on our team so that we can survive the Western Conference. And meanwhile, they trade James Harden. That's the climate of the NBA at that time. Was you need bigs to survive, and with Pat Riley, running your team, he's got visions of Alonzo Mourning and Shaquille O'Neal, Kareem. And I think part of the reason why LeBron and Dwayne weren't as effective as they should have been in that first year was a lot of the taking turns, for sure. But a lot of it was just spacing issues, is that they were going through a forest of bigs to get to the rim. So I think what they did was they saw that LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, in order to get to the rim, they'd have to go through a forest of trees, whether it's Joel Anthony, Big Z, whoever it is at the 5. And that was just the climate of the NBA. And it wasn't until the end of the 2012 season that Eric Spoelstra said, wait a minute, why are we starting these bigs, these guys at the 5, when we could just slide Bosch to the 5 in space? And so that kind of opened things up for LeBron. And what's interesting about this series is that LeBron is now on a team in which they are insisting on starting Dwight at the 5 and AD at the 4. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see the chess match that the Spo does, because this is a guy who lived through 2011 against Dallas, that threw a lot of zone at LeBron, a lot of zone at the Heat. And it wasn't the thing that won the series, but it certainly shook them to their core and threw LeBron off. And that was 9 years ago. But I don't think either of them, LeBron or Spo, are ever going to forget how that made them feel, that series. And I think that's going to be the fascinating thing is, will Eric Spoelstra lean on the zone defense to just throw off the Lakers and make LeBron James become a jump shooter? Because if you're going to go with Dwight Howard and Anthony Davis at the 4 and 5, if you go big, you're going to demand them to shoot and space the floor, pack the paint and space the floor. And that's going to turn LeBron into a jump shooter. And that was the San Antonio Spurs game plan. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be a Spurs game plan going into this series.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things I wanted to get to with you, is that I do feel like the roles have flipped, at least for Eric Spoelstra. He is now Rick Carlisle. And it's, everybody's making this comparison to the 2004 finals in Detroit. This Heat team doesn't remind me of Detroit at all. They remind me of Dallas. In this context, they remind me of Dallas 2011. Now, they don't have a Dirk per se, although they do have a lead guy, obviously, in Jimmy, who sets the tone. They don't have a Dirk, but if you look at the collection of players, and we did this with Nikias and Alex, myself last night, kind of going through the top 10 players in this series. And of course, 1 and 2, you know where those are. 3 and 4, you can obviously is pretty clear, I think. But I had 5 through 7 with Miami. Now Nikias did not, but even he got to, I think, 6 out of 10 with Miami, or 6 out of 11 with Miami. And that's what this feels like a little bit to me, is that, Miami has essentially become, in this context, Dallas 2011. And I didn't even think of the zone concept, but you're absolutely right, because that threw off that series. And then, to be honest, on the other side, Spoelstra as the favorite coach in that series, I didn't think reacted well to it. One of the things we talk about a lot is the corpse of Mike Bibby. Starting through 5 games. Bibby might be better now that he's put on 100 pounds of muscle, but he, at that point, not starting Mario Chalmers until game 6. And I think one of the things that you touch on that's also interesting is you talk about the spacing in that first year for Miami. Part of the issue I think nobody talks about is they were expecting Mike Miller to be that guy. And obviously with Mike's injuries that really didn't happen. And they didn't get Shane and Ray until later and be able to really unlock that. But that idea, I mean, do you see, you were at that series, you covered that series. Do you see any parallels other than the zone part, just in terms of how these teams match up or the perception of them going to a series to 2011?
Oh, 100%. I'm writing about it for NBC Sports, just the idea of what 2011 did to LeBron and Spo. And when you look at the roster of the Dallas Mavericks, you have Hall of Famers all over the place with, Jason Kidd and Dirk Nowitzki and Sean Marion, borderline Hall of Fame case. They're just veteran guys like Andre Iguodala, Goran Dragic, Jimmy Butler, who hadn't won the big one yet. Dirk was a guy who was the MVP, soft European guy who could never win the big one. And I don't think it's a one-to-one relationship with him and Jimmy Butler, but I see a lot of similarities in the idea of like people counted out Jimmy Butler as not a good teammate. He blows up this team, and I'm guilty of this too. He blows up, every team that he's been on, Chicago and Minnesota, and then Philly, who knows what happened there. And so I think there are some parallels with him and Dirk in the sense that there's a lot of doubt with him and he's overcoming that perception. Now, I think a lot of it also what you have to look at with this matchup is how different these two teams, or at least the Miami Heat, are since the regular season matchups with the Lakers. So if you look back to November and December in their matchups, it's been a year since they played against each other. Keep in mind, Myers Leonard in those games was minus 27 in 26 minutes. Wow. And then without Myers Leonard, they were plus 9 in 70 minutes, Miami Heat against the Lakers. And so to go back to the idea of going big, playing zone, or the Lakers going big and the Heat going zone and having Bam at the 5, I mean, there's all sorts of evidence that this Miami Heat team is way better suited to face the Lakers than they were in the regular season when they were trying to match size for size with Myers at the 5 and Bam at the 4. And then keep in mind that Kendrick Nunn was also a mess in that he was that starting lineup was minus 26 in 21 minutes against the Lakers in the regular season. So in 2 matchups, the scoreboard was Lakers 58, Miami Heat 32, when they had Myers Leonard and Kendrick Nunn on the floor next to Bam, Duncan Robinson, and JB. So you're looking at a regular season matchup in which the Miami Heat were 0-2 and got beat pretty bad in the first game. But when they go to Miami, and this has been true for LeBron in over the last several years, is he doesn't play well against Miami in Miami. And so I'm curious to see how going small with Bam at the small, quote unquote, with Bam at the 5, throwing the zone at the Lakers, what that's going to do to LeBron and Frank Vogel, because you're right. Spo is going to be like Rick Carlisle in this, in the sense that they're the feisty veteran underdogs going against LeBron. And I do think that there are a lot of takeaways from that 2011 that I think Spo will utilize in this one.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's not just taking Myers and Nunn out of the starting lineup. They're out of the rotation entirely, and you've replaced them with 2 of the guys who guard LeBron best in the league, in Iguodala and Crowder, who were not a part of those matchups. And those matchups were tight. I mean, the first one, the one in L.A., Dragic kind of kept them afloat in that game. They didn't play particularly well, but it was also people forget it was the end of a long road trip. I'm not saying the Lakers were playing at the peak of their powers at that point either, but it's hard to take much away from that. And then the home one, I mean, there were 2 missed calls according to the last 2-minute report on the Jimmy Butler 3 attempt at the end. And they were right in that, and Dragic wasn't playing.
Dragic did not play in game 2. Yeah, the second game.
Right, Dragic didn't play, and like you said, they were starting a totally different lineup. I mean, I think you have to junk it. I also feel like, and I've said this since the Heat have gone in the bubble. I mean, to me, the Heat had a ton of advantages coming into the bubble, and people on Five on the Floor who listen to this podcast are tired of listening to it, but we've been right, which is that, I thought the teams that would survive in the bubble would be teams that had good depth to be able, because you didn't know how guys were going to come back to the bubble. For instance, Kendrick Nunn came back not in the condition that, for a lot of reasons, personal and COVID, et cetera, that he was before he went in. Mm-hmm. And, during the pre-COVID season, but you're able to replace him because you had enough depth. And so I think you needed teams with depth. You needed teams with young legs, because I thought those players were going to come back quicker and also develop from what they'd done before. And we see that obviously with Tyler Hero being the prime example. You needed elite coaching to be able to put these pieces together and keep a group committed, their chemistry in a positive direction for 2-3 months. They had the right coach for that. And you had the right, and I hate using the word. Everybody knows I hate using the word, but they had the right culture to kind of get through this. And so that's one of the reasons why I wagered on them to go to the finals, even though I didn't think it was necessarily going to happen. I was like, I think there's a shot because of all these circumstances, and we've seen that play out. And you mentioned, again, Nunn and Leonard being two guys who were, primary to their success. Their starting lineup, Tom, that was a top 10 starting lineup in the regular season, right? And I'm not talking about against the Lakers. I'm talking about just generally, right?
Yeah. But Spo, I think, also looking back to 2011, I think he learned that he shouldn't be afraid to adjust lineups. And you're seeing it here in the bubble, where if he was 2011 Spo, he might be holding on to Myers Leonard the same way that he held on to Mike Bibby.
Yeah.
Where I remember it was like yesterday, Ethan, was when I wrote the story. The headline was Mike Bibby, most unproductive postseason player in NBA history. And it was true. Is Mike Bibby, his player efficiency rating was zilch. He couldn't hit a shot. And Spo held on to that because I think he was waiting for that investment to pay dividends, and it never did. And so I think now Spo recognizes he is so much more confident and assertive as a head coach, and knows that, he can play the first move in that chess match without having to react. And I think having this lineup with, Tyler Hero coming in, Andre Iguodala coming in, Jay Crowder in the starting lineup, I think it's fascinating. If you look at those two regular season matchups, I think the Heat shot 16 of 68 from downtown. That's not going to sustain with this shooting team now. And so I think when you look at the regular season matchups, you can junk it. The new starting lineup, the Heat were absolutely frigid cold from downtown. And I think now I feel a bit of a homer here, but I'm going Heat in 7 in this series.
Wow, I was going to let you do that at the end.
We can discuss it now, and how you feel about that.
We can. You've given away the ghost here. I don't want to say which way I'm leaning, but I'm certainly thinking about a long series, a lot longer than other people are saying. And I am going to give a pick before we go here. Probably not on this one, but on the next one. But all right, let's dive into it then, because you've thrown it out there. So Heat in 7. I don't see anybody else picking that, honestly. And one of the big reasons that I'm looking at it seriously is what we talked about, which is that you've added two guys in Crowder and Iguodala who you can throw at LeBron James, in addition to Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, maybe a little bit of Derrick Jones Jr. I can't remember, and I wrote a bunch of stories because obviously I handled a lot of this from the LeBron perspective for years, and even when I covered him, when I spent the year up in Cleveland, going through the playoff series is that he's lost, okay, over the course of time. And there aren't a ton of them, right? But the ones that he lost all had some common attributes. And one of the attributes is you had to have 2 or 3 plus wing defenders. It couldn't be one. You had to have 2 or 3. And you go back to the Boston series, right? What Cleveland 1.0, right? Where you had James Posey and Tony Allen, right? You always have to have a couple. In the case of that Dallas series in 2011, a lot of it was zone, but they also threw a bunch. Sean Marion did a lot of the dirty work, but they had others who worked him over. You can't count on one guy to do it for 30, 35 minutes. But I can't remember. I mean, other than, I guess, I don't know, Golden State, where, you know, it was Iguodala and Draymond. I can't remember a team, and Clay, obviously. I can't remember a team that had more options to throw at him than Miami does. I mean, were you talking? I mean, I just named 5 guys off the top, and I actually think you're going to see some Solomon Hill on him too. Like, I think there's going to be 6 different players that LeBron is going to have to deal with at one time or another.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They've got bodies that can guard LeBron. They've got the zone defense, which I think will slow them down. They get back in transition, which is what you need to do against this Lakers team that likes to get out and run. And you have a guy who can guard AD in Bam. So I think it checks off all the boxes. It's hard to pick against LeBron James as a favorite in the series. But then again, in 2011, we saw that happen, how that played out against an underdog, where it almost feels like, you know, the momentum is on the underdog side, where the Heat are playing with so much confidence and understanding that anything that happens here is just icing on the cake. Not many people are expecting them to win, and therefore it's kind of just like, let's give them everything. Let's throw everything at LeBron and AD and make them feel us in ways that I think that Dallas in 2011 did the same thing, which was, you know, we have the veteran team. No one's expecting us to win. And I think LeBron has shown that, like, look, if you're going to pick against me against Houston and Portland and Denver, okay, I'm going to win those series in 5. But I just think that the Heat pose a lot more problems for LeBron and AD than Denver did and Houston, who isn't as disciplined and as energetic and as conditioned as this Miami Heat team. So I think it's going to go deep. I don't think it's going to be over quickly. And I think with the fact that there is no home court advantage, I think that also plays into the favor of this Miami Heat team, where in Game 7, you almost never pick the team that is quote unquote away.
Good point.
But I just think that's neutralized on this in this scenario.
And that's one of the things that I don't think has been talked about enough that has been another Heat advantage is they were the 5 seed and they would have been the road team in every single series. Now, I don't think they would have been the 5 seed without these circumstances, because I think they would have been the 4 or maybe even the 3, because if you looked at their schedule before the COVID shutdown, like their last 15, 20 games of the year, they were playing all the garbage teams that didn't get invited to the bubble. So although of course Heat fans know, and you know, the random scrub Heat killer thing, and they probably would have dropped a couple of those. I mean, they did lose to Charlotte
That's still a thing?
Oh no, it's always a thing, man.
Oh,
I don't know who
wow.
it's gonna be Caruso in this series, I think, right? It has. I mean, I try to think who else it would be. It's got to be Caruso. I mean, not that he's a scrub, but Heat fans are gonna they're gonna process it that way. But yeah, oh no, that's
gonna be KCP. It's gonna be KCP. You know, he's gonna have.
I don't know. Can it be KCP when he's been relatively consistent for him over the past, I don't know, 3 weeks?
Yeah, but okay. Caruso, I love Caruso, so I'm not gonna call him a scrub. I think he's great for them.
All right, so we won't call either of the scrub, but there is always a random. No, Heat fans have the same phobias that they always had. It hasn't changed, and also I know you don't work for them anymore, but they also, you know, obviously have the anti-ESPN thing, which at this point that's been kind of reversed, Tom. Whereas all the attention was on the Heat, now nobody pays attention to them. I mean, literally, the Celtics were just playing the Celtics in that series. The Celtics and Jason Tatum's son. We're playing, and Marcus Smart's Grit were playing the Celtics because the Heat did not exist to ESPN in that entire series. It was fascinating, which is completely opposite to what it used to be, where it was all the Heat, right, during the Big Three era, and nobody cared about anything else. But of course, that's the LeBron thing. All right, I got one more thing to get to with Tom right after a word from Safe Cubbies.
I want to introduce you to another of the great new sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and it is a sponsor that would be important in any time if you want to have a beautiful workspace, but it's especially important now when you need a safe one as well, and that's safecubbies.com, which offers modular office solutions designed to elevate your open office into a modern and safe environment at any budget. You can personalize your workspace with options like whiteboards, magnetic panels, acrylic sheets, and graphic branding. Most of the surfaces are non-porous for easy cleaning and can be removed or replaced within minutes. Now, this is for workplaces. They've got a bunch of different options on their professional series, but also they've got private room solutions, dividers and sneeze guards, and they have a classroom series as well. So if you're involved with a school, this is definitely something your school should check out, of course, if we have school in the fall. And that's the point here. We are entering a new normal period with COVID-19. SafeCubbies.com, which is locally owned, is the place that you want to go. The phone number is 754-216-1071. Again, that's 754-216-1071 or SafeCubbies.com.
All right, so I want to go to you with this because I feel like it's kind of like a hipster bar, that one of the ones I used to go to with my buddy Joe Goodman on the road during those 4 years, that like you kind of know about, but the rest of the world really doesn't, and then it kind of pisses you off when everybody finds it. I feel like the Heat are sort of a hipster team this year, and I think in a couple of different regards, like the world is coming around to Bam Adebayo. Who, I felt like Heat fans identified early. Maybe it was in contrast to Hassan Whiteside and being the complete opposite. But they loved Bam before the world did. Where do you think Bam is now in terms of being is he a top 20 player in the NBA?
I think he is. I mean, what else does he need to prove? He's already got a nice little mid-range J. And that's the only weakness in his game is the ability to space the floor. But I think he's going to have that. Like if I'm projecting next season, he's definitely a top 20 player in my book. And that, I know what people think is that we're overreacting to just like a hot streak here, but this isn't just a hot streak. Like he just put up like LeBron type numbers in the Eastern Conference Finals. When you include the assists, the rebounds are always going to be there. The effort's always going to be there. The leadership is going to be there. So are there 20 players I would take over Bam Adebayo in the NBA going into next season and beyond? No. The dude's 23 years old? And he's doing this? No, I think he's already gotten an all-star bid, and I think he's a top 20 player. And like when you talk about players that you want to play with, it is Bam Adebayo. Mm-hmm. That's it. He moves the ball, he plays his ass off, and he defends at a high level, and he's not going to demand the ball every time down the floor. I mean, that's Draymond. Like, we're doing this already where in the NBA draft, we go to like the flavor of the month where it's like, oh, who's this guy? And everyone's looking for a Bam Adebayo. Yeah, right. Like when you look at the top defensive prospects in the NBA draft, people are going, oh yeah, he's a lot of like Bam Adebayo, and I'm guilty of it too. So I think the idea of Bam and the reality of Bam is everything you want in a big man. And so I think he's absolutely a top 20 player in my book.
We'll get back to our episode with Tom Haberstroh here in a second. Before we do, I want to tell you about another of the great local sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and this is Mr. Kitchen. You can find them at mrkitchen.org. That's O-R-G. All of your construction needs with licensed contractors, custom American-made cabinetries. And here's the thing. They've got showrooms in Broward and Palm Beach counties. They've been doing this for 15 years here in South Florida. All you have to do is text a picture of your kitchen to 561-400-1195. That's 561-400-1195, and they will give you a free estimate. And if you decide to go forward, you get 5% off the total bill using the code 5ONTHEFLOOR. That's spelled out F-I-V-E, or just the number 5 on the floor for 5% off your total order. 561-400-1195 for the free estimate. That's with the text, or go to the website, mrkitchen.org. And now, back to the episode. Yeah, and I'm going back to some of the comparisons that Pat made on draft night, and he kept talking about a guy who, Bam has kind of evolved in a totally different way than this, but the comp he made on draft night was Shawn Kemp, which Shawn, for people who don't remember Shawn, you should watch the Sonic series against the Bulls in the finals. I mean, Shawn was Shawn was an above the rim player, like we kind of almost never seen to that point. And he had other elements to his game, but he wasn't the team wrecking defender that Bam is, right? I mean, he was a more, I don't say he was a more polished. He did become a more polished offensive player I mean, he was just a physical freak. So I think that's where the comp comes in here. And to a certain extent, the other comp that was made, although they're totally different players too, is Dwight. And it's funny because, I talked to Dwight about that when Dwight came down with the Lakers this year. And his eye, I know there's the facial comparison.
They straight up look alike.
Okay,
yeah.
I mean, they straight up, yeah. And Dwight, laughed and acknowledged that people mistake him for Bam now, which is kind of funny, but because it was always the other way around. But his face light up when he talked about Bam as a player. But I do think Bam is a new breed. I mean, he's a hybrid of all of these guys. But I think the thing that separates him from all of them is the intangible thing. It's not. He's like the most unselfish big I've ever seen. I mean, to the point where it's frustrating. Yeah. Like where you're like, right? You're like in the last. I mean, he only took over a game. Like he took over Game 6 against Boston one time this year, and it was when Jimmy was off the floor, and it was a game against Washington. And it was. I remember tweeting with like 5 minutes. Okay, Bam, now. Okay, because there's nobody else there to do it. And it's the thing with Bam that's crazy is bigs usually come into the league with outsized egos, particularly when they're drafted high. He needs to be told how great he is. And I think once that clicks, like top 20 may be low. I think I'm with you for right now, top 20. But it might be top 10. When he starts to figure out nobody can check me, which I think he started to figure out late in that Boston series,
he's shooting 57% from the floor, Ethan, in the postseason. Like in the entire postseason, he's shooting 57% of the floor. And a lot of those are off the dribble. So it's not just he's Tyson Chandler out there and just finishing at the rim. He's got some on-ball moves. Like he's a really talented offensive guy, not just as a passer. But so could he go from 11 field goal attempts to 15 to 16? Yes, 100%. He's starting to realize how good he is. And, there's a lot of talk about Daniel Tice against him and being a wash and people saying that. And that's an amazing little detail in that series retrospectively. But Bam just averaged 22 points a game in a series against Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals, one of the best defending teams in the NBA. Okay. Can't take that away from him. And a lot of that is he's getting to the free throw line. He's becoming more and more assertive offensively. And this is going to be a huge matchup for him because they are going to need his passing and his, dribble handoffs with Duncan Robinson to just free up the floor against, Dwight and Anthony Davis. If they're going to play two bigs against the Heat, Bam Adebayo is going to be so important because you're going to drag basically Dwight or AD out to the perimeter and open up the paint. If you're doing these dribble handoffs, you can slip, get to the rim, and Bam is just going to if he plays really well in this series, and I believe he can, because he's been empowered by Spo and the whole organization. Man, there's going to be a reckoning in the league with Bam Adebayo.
Well, I think if they win this series, to me, he's going to be the MVP. The more I look at it, the more I come to that conclusion. I think cases could be made on the Heat for Butler or Hero, but if they win this series, he's going to be the MVP. I think there's a legitimate scenario that they could win this series and one of the guys on the other side wins the MVP, which we've only seen a couple of times. And of course, LeBron thought it should have happened in 2015 instead of the guy who he's now going to be facing in this series, Andre Iguodala. I've never seen LeBron so pissed behind.
Would that be the most Heat thing ever?
Oh, absolutely.
They would love that. They would love it.
Absolutely. And I cannot remember LeBron being as up. The only two things I've seen him really upset, well, a few others, but two of the things I've seen him really upset about through the years was and I was part of this, the Defensive Player of the Year vote for Marc Gasol. He was really angry that day, and he knew who voted for who. Okay, and when we approached him pregame, and Derrick Rose one didn't please him either, obviously, but that was the one that really pissed him off. And the other one was 2015, and I will say I didn't have a vote for that MVP. Howard Beck had it for us at Bleacher Report. And I think he went with Iguodala also, so it wasn't my fault, LeBron. All right, last one here on the hipster tour is Eric Spoelstra, and I feel like it's ridiculous whether we're at this stage where it's like, oh my God, the world's realizing that Eric Spoelstra is a good coach, like an elite coach, like maybe the top coach in the league potentially. But I think you were there a long time ago, and so was I. Has he gotten better in your view, or are people just noticing it?
I think it's a little bit of both. Spo has always been a great head coach. And I think 2011 was such a stain on everybody involved that year that I think it took a while for Eric to build up his elite credibility because of what happened in that final series. And everyone was to blame for that demise. So I think Spo, what he's so good at is adjusting. And this is the thing that makes Pop. It's not because Pop has a philosophy that he instills like the triangle offense on every team. We saw how that worked with Phil Jackson. It doesn't work as long as you are able to adapt with the times, you can be an elite coach in this league. And Spo has done that. I mean, you go from Dion Waiters and Hassan Whiteside into this team, like that's an amazing coaching job, is to be able to flip so quickly and redefine yourself as a coach. And I think that is the common denominator with him and Greg Popovich, is their ability to adapt. You know, Greg Popovich hated threes, but he popularized the corner three. Mm-hmm. You know, he hated, the idea of, playing fast, but he would play fast with Tony Parker. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to play, half court game. Like Popovich recognized, I have to play to my team's strength, my player strengths. And Duncan Robinson, like the Miami Heat weren't a 3-point shooting team. And then they found Duncan Robinson. We're like, we're going to make this guy the best 3-point shooter in the NBA. And it's going to help things so much more for our team. And the Heat are, way more 3-point heavy than they used to be. And I think when you look at Spo, that is the thread line, is the fact that he's able to adjust and he's not afraid to do that. And, look a couple years ago when people talk about the Mike D'Antoni going small with PJ Tucker at the 5. Did we forget that Spo started Justice Winslow in playoff series at the 5?
Right. Well, we tried to, right? I mean, because that was by necessity. But you're correct. He sort of had no choice, because you're talking about the series Whiteside was out against Toronto.
Yeah. And of course he didn't have much of a choice there, but also like the Houston Rockets made a deliberate choice to get rid of their 5, and they were going to play PJ Tucker at the 5. But I think when you look at Spo, he's been willing to make those adjustments. And I think that is what is the calling card for him now, is he's not afraid, just like Nick Nurse wasn't afraid last year and this year, is to just be able to adapt, take new information and make yourself better. And I think when he talks about growth mindset, he is the embodiment of that growth mindset. And I think that's what makes him one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in the NBA.
Yeah, no, it's a great way to close here. And I do think that if he wins this series, then, it's too far gone at that point. I think, even those who didn't want to acknowledge it before, are going to have to say he's a top 3 coach in the league, and it's just the way it is. And the coaches in the league have said it for a long time. So that's not a new thing. And I think if you ask Pat Riley, truth serum, he'd say Eric's a better coach than he ever was. There were different types of coaches. I think what's interesting is Eric is best known for having to do the Pat Riley type job, which was the managing of egos during the Big 3 era. But as far as an innovator, it's at this stage, it's not really close. I mean, Pat made some adjustments over the course of his coaching career, obviously going going from Showtime to, we're going to, telling the marketing people, put chalk outlines on the floor to show what Anthony Mason and Charles Oakley and Patrick Ewing are to do to other teams. And so obviously he made changes, but the changes that Eric has made have been lasting changes in the NBA. Like you mentioned D'Antoni, like I know that Eric has taken a lot from D'Antoni and has openly spoken about that, but he's gone past D'Antoni at this stage. I mean, it's because he's had more success kind of innovating in recent years. And I feel like D'Antoni has made changes because his top players have forced him to make changes. Like, I don't know that playing, the isolation style with Harden is really the way that he would want to go if you watched any of his Suns teams. With Eric, I do feel like Eric's more at the forefront of actually making the push. It's not his players forcing him to do it. It's him seeing his players and saying, okay, like you said, I can take this piece, I can take this piece, I can play this, take this piece, and we can start to play this style. And the only shame is that he got stuck for 2 or 3 years with Hassan Whiteside as an anchor where he couldn't do any of the things, because that's the last thing that Eric would want to do. Like, of all the styles, like, right? Like, if you were to say, if Pat Riley was to say, Eric, I want to putt a shoe, okay? I want to putt a shoe. I'm going to give you a player who is totally antithetical to everything that you believe in, from a playing style standpoint, and from an attitude
offensive standpoint,
and I'm going to max that guy so that we can't bring in other talent around him, right? And he's going to mope all over the floor for 3 years. I mean, it's a wonder Eric didn't quit. And honestly, from what I heard, if that had continued, that may have ultimately happened. So I just think it's such a freeing thing. And Tom, if you'd seen him at Media Day this year, the column I wrote that day is Eric Spoelstra has his team again. It just felt like this giant cloud had been lifted. He had a star that actually wanted to be there. He had a guy in Bam, this Swiss Army knife. He had shooters. It's like, he's in heaven right now. Like, it's perfect for him. And I think his team reflects it because, when you have Jimmy Butler wearing his, could you imagine Hassan Whiteside going and getting Spo's college or high school jersey to wear around the bubble?
And now that you're talking about it, I'm reminded of the fact that he's turning 50 in a month, and he looks like he's 35.
Yeah, don't remind me, because I'm 3 years younger than him. So whatever he is,
like, he hasn't looked like Spo looks so happy, so relaxed. And I know it's been hard being away from his family during this bubble time and being away from Pat and not being able to do that. But I just think when you talk about Spo as a coach with this team, it's given him new life. It really has. Going through, what he went through with the Hassan Whiteside era. You're absolutely right. It's just he looks and whether it's his smiles, and I'm glad to see that he was taking that selfie after the game, because I got a text from someone who's a very, very close Spo watcher after they won that game against Boston and won the series to go to the finals. He texted me and he says, "Have you noticed that Spo hasn't smiled yet?" Like, going and shaking hands after the game, like he was just totally calm, serene. And I was happy to see Spo smile and just be showered with joy in those moments with his team thereafter. So he's at the top of his game. The Jimmy Butler marriage has been phenomenal. And I know when they traded for Jimmy Butler, there was a moment of, okay, he might not age gracefully considering all the nicks and the high minute totals and his age. But if we can just get Jimmy in for the next 2 years and maximize a team around Jimmy, we can make a run. And here are the Heat making that run. Now, before I go, I don't get to do Miami podcasts or Miami radio as much as I used to. But before I go, I want to give a shout out to Jordan Williams, J-Dub.
Yep.
I was stunned to see this the other day that he passed away. And I always loved his Heat takes and just his NBA takes. I'm really sad to see the news that he passed. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him at least once with the audience here. 2011, 2012, I was in Miami for 6 years, and I got to know a lot of Heat fans on Twitter. And he was one of the big ones. And I just want to give a shout out to him and to all those who are mourning his loss. And it sucks, but I know this team would be everything that Jordan wanted. And I think every Heat fan should understand that this is a really special team that they have. And it's just so sad that Jordan wasn't around to see it.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that. And I know Alf and I, one of my co-hosts here, Alf and Sydney, and I have talked about this a little bit, but that period of time, that 2010 through 2014, when it was kind of us against the world in Miami, that's why this Heat Twitter thing, I think, is stronger than it is maybe for some other teams. Because you really got to know those people, and honestly, a lot of those people are now my co-hosts. So it's kind of an amazing bond. And you mentioned I used to interact with him quite a bit, actually, and I can differentiate on Twitter, those who want to have serious conversations about basketball, and those who are just kind of giving you a hard time. And I always found him to be really thoughtful and And that was kind of a shock that just came out of nowhere a couple of weeks ago and started to circulate on Heat Twitter when people began to find out. So I know people appreciate you mentioning that, and obviously they appreciated your work all that time. And now you can find Tom over at, again, Tom Haberstroh on Twitter, but also at NBCsports.com. He is the NBA insider. See, I got it right this time.
You did.
Appreciate it. You know what we're going to have to do, though, I'm telling you. And also I want to also, share my thoughts to our friend Mike Wallace, who's been going through a challenging time, obviously, with what's happened with his family. I think, at some point, if the Heat win a championship, I'm extending an invitation. I'm bringing in the entire Heat Index. You, Windhorst, Arnovitz, and Wallace. We're just that may be the I wouldn't call it a celebration, but I think we have to have a little bit of a reunion on that thing. Maybe I'll even get Goodman to come in from Alabama, and the six of us will chop it up together. So.
Yeah, will Bill Ryder even come?
I don't know.
That's being an LA guy now.
Yeah, I know. He's part of that CBS machine. I'm not sure. I think we can get Ryder as the 7th. I think we can get Ryder as the 7th. Ryder won't pick up the check, though. I know that. So I'll I'll take care of that. Tom, thanks for doing it. Really appreciate it.
You got it, Ethan. Always a good time.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Regional Sports Network.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5
on the floor.